we're in this series talking about neighbors, and I was thinking this week about some neighbors that I've had over the years, and we were living. I don't want to give too much away because I did that one week and had some people came up to me and said they lived there, and I was like, oh. We lived in this one particular community in Ohio, and our kids were real young, and we moved in, and it was just enough land that. And we were renters. It was just enough land that we had a riding mower. And so I got to use that riding mower. But one day when I was out on that riding mower, I noticed that my next door neighbor came out of his house and came right up, looked like, I wasn't sure what he was doing, but he was standing near what looked like the line between my yard and his yard. And what I soon discovered was he came out to make sure that I didn't go too far with my riding mower. Every single week, like clockwork, he would come out and he would stand and he wouldn't say anything, but his facial expressions told me everything of what he was thinking. And when I would have, I was on staff at a church, and I would have part of my team or a group of people to come over, and every time he saw that people were coming, he would go and he would get sawhorses barriers out, and put them on the edge of his grass to make sure. And, I get it now. I get it. I shouldn't get it, but I get it. To make sure nobody pulled up into his yard and messed his yard up, right? I'll tell you, I wasn't going to share this part, but one day, the neighbors across the street, their kids were older than our kids. They were like 11 years old and 8 years old. And I mean, they were just kids, and they were everywhere in the neighborhood, had a great time. And at that stage of life where they were playing out in the woods out back, and I mean, they were just everywhere. And the daughter, she was the oldest. And one day she got into her parents' pickup truck, right across the street from my neighbor. And their driveway had a little slight incline. And somehow she got it to kick into neutral. And that pickup truck went down, and there were no barriers. It went right into the neighbor's yard. Everybody was okay. She was fine. I don't know how my neighbor was, but the yard that got some ruts in it, but she was fine. But the tension that was there around the borders of his yard, right? Like his border coming up against my yard, and the tension that I felt all those years that we lived there, and those weeks that I would come out and I would be afraid I was going to accidentally mow a little of his yard. Some people like it when you mow their yard. No, all right? Tension. The tension that was there between the borders. Last week, we talked about the story of the Good Samaritan. Most people are familiar with the Good Samaritan. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you've probably heard that phrase, Good Samaritans. And there's lots of nonprofit organizations like Samaritan's Purse about, caring for people. And we talked and dove into that story. And it's interesting because Samaritans were neighbors of the Jewish people, right? Like there was this, they were, where it was located, like Israel, the area all around it, and this little part of Israel was called Samaria. And they were neighbors. They had a background feud that went, for hundreds of years, all the way back to when the Israelites had been taken into captivity by the empire, the Assyrian Empire, and some of them got left, and that's who would make up the Samaritan people. And then when the Israelites came back from captivity, the tension and the animosity, the racism that existed between the two groups was fiercely tense. But in the New Testament, There are 4 times in the New Testament part of the Bible, there are 4 times that Jesus directly addresses Samaria. And 2 of those times, they involve, one, a story like we talked about last week, the Good Samaritan. And then another time, there's a story about Jesus, his actual interaction with a Samaritan woman, which is what we're going to talk about today. But as we get into this and we talk about what it means to be a good neighbor, last week we talked about how a good neighbor creates margin for compassion, like the Good Samaritan in Luke 10, that story. But this week, the main thing that I want you to take away is this, and you can find this in your notes and quotes. That's in that Church Center app if you want to follow along. The main thing that I want you to take away is this, that a good neighbor engages with respect and truth. A good neighbor engages with respect and truth. Now, this story that we're going to look at today in the New Testament book of John, it's in the New Testament book of John, chapter 4. It begins with this whole scene unfolding where Jesus' ministry is growing in popularity, and the religious leaders, these Pharisees, who are these Jewish religious leaders, are trying to stir up something between Jesus' followers and another guy, a prophet, if you will, named John the Baptist. They're trying to stir up controversy and division, and Jesus sees it a mile away. And so Jesus, never being afraid of controversy, never being afraid of stirring up some stuff himself, he actually decides to go through Samaria, this place where there is tension between him or his people, the Jewish people, and the Samaritans. A deep, deep tension. So deep that a lot of times, I'll even tell you this, it was so bad that Jewish people would oftentimes travel around the area instead of taking maybe a shorter route going through it. For reasons like, not only did they hate them, but they were afraid of them. It was known that if a Jewish person traveled through that area, that the Samaritans, there might be a pack of them that would attack them and beat them. It was that brutal. It was that tense. And so it's that kind of area that Jesus decides to go straight through and to take the journey through it. And as he journeys with his disciples through Samaria, he actually takes a break midway through, and I'm going to make my changeover. I hear that crackling noise. Jesus takes a break and stops in this village called Sychar. Sychar is where, right outside that village, one of Israel's ancestors had a well. Their ancestor, Jacob, right? So in the story of Israel, in the whole lineup of Israel's fathers, the people who were there when the people of Israel were created as a people group, as a nation, you have Abraham, you have his son Isaac, and then you have Isaac's son Jacob. Jacob, this ancestor of the Israelites. So right there in the middle of Samaria, this area where there's so much tension, is Jacob's well. Jesus stops at Jacob's well after traveling. And we're going to pick it up. Just listen to these 2 verses in John chapter 4, verses 4 and 6. It says, Jesus had to go through Samaria. Jesus, tired from the long walk, he sat wearily beside the well about noontime. All right? Jesus stops at this point, and then he sends his disciples on into that little village of Sychar, maybe to get some food, maybe to figure out some stuff for them for the rest of their journey. But while Jesus is stopped there at this well, a Samaritan woman comes to the well to draw water. So the picture is Jesus, weary from the long walk, is sitting at this well when a Samaritan woman comes out to see him. We're going to pick it up in verse 9. It says, and let me tell you this before we pick it up here. At that moment, Jesus asked her for a drink of water. He asked her for a drink of water. And this is what happens. The woman was surprised, for Jews refuse to have anything to do with Samaritans. Listen to this, like her reaction here. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus replied to her, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water." Now, I want to examine just a little bit here of her response to Jesus, right? Did you notice it says she was surprised? She was surprised that Jesus would ask her for a drink. Talk about an interruption. We were just talking about interruptions. This has totally interrupted everything for her. Just right here at this very moment. More than likely, she had come to the well to be left alone, right? She came to the well in the middle of the day. Most people, you either go in the morning when it's cool because you're going to be carrying a big old bucket of water. I was carrying some big buckets of water. By the way, Ashley, that took a lot of courage to step into that water today. Because this morning when I got here, our warming unit was not working. And so we got it to work, and I had to pour in, I brought in 4 or 5 pound bucket full of hot water. I really had hoped it had gotten better. It was better than it was, I promise you that. But to carry all that water, you don't come in the middle of the day when it's hot. And so as she approached the well, imagine this. She would have noticed a Jewish man sitting there. She would have noticed something was not right. This is not what she was expecting. And already, probably in her mind, she's prepared for the worst. Or when she notices that it's a Jewish man, maybe even recognizing him being as a rabbi, she knows he will leave her alone. Because that's what is expected. That he will ignore her existence. That she won't even be acknowledged by him. That is, all of that might have been in her mind until he asked her for a drink. The original language here, when I looked at that part of the scripture that talked about her asking, or he was asking her for something to drink, a drink of water, it was like he's asking her for the gift of a drink, a gift of some water. He was asking her in a gentle, respectful way for the gift of what she was going to be drawing out of that well. And her reaction to him tells us everything. She says exactly what she thinks. You ever done that? You ever had a moment where you think something and it comes out? I wonder if that was kind of what happened at first, right? Like staring at him, wondering what just happened, and what she was thinking came out. You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to talk to me. And so this whole opening scene shows us how Jesus actually engages with her respectfully. Because to even ask her for the gift of water was to acknowledge her humanity. Do you see that? The fact that he even asked her for a water. See, Jesus is not afraid to engage with her. He's not afraid to ask her for something to drink. He's not afraid to be seen alone with her. And her response to this wondering why he was asking for a drink of water, it opens the door for Jesus to offer her something even better. Something her weary life had been longing for, even if she didn't realize it right away. While she comes to the well for a physical water, a water to quench her thirst, Jesus offers her something spiritual, a spiritual type of water that will heal her deepest needs. And she doesn't even remotely know how to respond to this. She doesn't even remotely understand exactly what he's talking about, because in her mind, she's thinking of the physical water, the kind of water that she came there to draw out of the well. And if you think about it, the kind of water that was sitting at the bottom of this well, Jesus knew what kind of picture he was painting for her, because that kind of water is kind of a stale water. It can be kind of a stagnant water. Jesus has something that flows and is free, life-changing. And while she doesn't quite understand what he's getting at, there's something about Jesus. There's something about the tone and the way that he engaged with her. I believe Jesus shows her respect, probably a respect unlike any man, especially probably any Jewish man, had ever treated her with. And how do we know that? Just based on her response to him. But Jesus talks about a living water that he offers to her. And she's really, really interested in this kind of water. Because if it means for her to no longer have to come in the middle of the day, if it means that she doesn't have to experience what she had been experiencing, she wants it. So you notice that it begins to turn when she tells Jesus to give her some of that kind of water. Tell me where it is. Show me where it is. Where can I find this kind of water? Water that is different than whatever that is that she had been drawing from this well over and over again. And Jesus responds to her. Listen to what he says. He says, "Go and get your husband." Now here's what she says to him. "I don't have a husband." Jesus says, "You're right. You don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now." Jesus says, you certainly have spoken the truth. Well, now this takes a sudden turn, doesn't it? I've read this passage so many times over the years. It doesn't matter how many times I've read it. This moment is such a powerful moment. Suddenly, why she's at the well in the middle of the day begins to make sense, doesn't it? She's avoiding the guilt and the shame. She's avoiding all the people who have probably talked about her forever. She's avoiding all of that, even if it means coming in the middle of the day when it's so hot and so hard and so heavy. And see, while Jesus engages with her in a respectful way from the very beginning, notice he doesn't avoid telling her the truth. See, Jesus engages with the truth. Because Jesus knows that before she can experience the living water that he is offering her, the living water that can heal the deep needs of her very life, before her life can change, she needs to face what it is that is keeping her a prisoner to her shame and guilt. She has to face it. Now, Jesus clearly is not the source of her shame and guilt. Her choices and the path she has chosen to deal with her pain have led her to experience the shame and guilt and isolation. Because she is not living a life filled with God's purpose for her. She had been running from relationship to relationship 5 times, married. And of course, listen, of course there probably were times where it was necessary and reasons why it had to end. Who knows what's behind it? But the guy she's living with at that moment isn't her husband. And so clearly she's living in a way that is rejecting what God wants for her. And she knows that. I love how even when Jesus speaks the truth to her, he's already set the tone, because the truth comes out from a respected place of her and a love for her. He tells her, you have spoken the truth. And now Jesus offers her a different kind of relationship with a totally different kind of focus. A relationship that will give her the results that she really was looking for in all those other relationships and all those failed marriages where she, like the song says, looking for love in all the wrong places. Jesus is showing her where the right place is. And Jesus is offering her a life that can be filled by God's presence and with God's purpose. Do you hear me? He is offering her a life that can be filled with God's presence and God's purpose, where she can know God and have the healing of what it means to be known by God. There is healing when we come to the place of realizing that God knows us and He still loves us. Jesus, I love this too. Jesus isn't playing a gotcha game with her. Here's what's happening. God is speaking through Jesus into her life. And you know what He's saying to her? I know you. I know the truth. I know the truth about your sin. I know the truth about your shame. I know the truth about your pain. What Jesus has done in this setting and in this scene, right here in the very first part of this whole dialogue and engagement with her, Jesus has helped her to realize she is known by God. So here's another thing I want you to remember this morning as we're in this Good Neighbor series. Our neighbors need to feel known by us, right? It begins, all of this conversation that Jesus has with her is Jesus, first of all, helping her to know that He knows her, right? And as he helps her to know and recognize that He knows her story, He knows all about what's going on, and yet He still asks her for some water. And yet He still recognizes and sees her as a human being. So the first thing Jesus does is He helps her to know He knows her. And then through Him helping her know that, she can sense and feel known by God. Our neighbors need to feel known by us because we can help our neighbors feel known by God by helping them feel known by us. Again, it's not some kind of gotcha moment. It's not something where we go around telling people that we're going to call them out on their messes. There may be moments when that might help, but it's a rare moment. The only time that we can speak that kind of truth is when it comes from a place of deep love and respect. Jesus shows this woman incredible respect. Now, the rest of the story goes on to include this really interesting dialogue where, at first, when she realizes that Jesus knows a little more than she thought he would know, she tries to engage in this deep theological religious discussion about where God is and how her people see God in one way and his people see God in one way. And really maybe nobody knows God in any way. But Jesus, again, still speaking the truth, says, hey, salvation comes through the Jews, which meaning, hey, salvation comes through Jesus because he was the Jew. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah. The God King that God has sent to rescue his people. Through Jesus, he is rescuing the world. Salvation coming through the Jews. Which is why when she hears Jesus talking like this, she responds in John chapter 4, verse 25. She says, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. And when he comes, he will explain everything to us. And guess what? All of a sudden, Jesus gets this great opportunity to say, I am the Messiah. Man, I know. I've read this story. I've heard this story so many times, but it never fails to move me. Do you see how this all unfolded? Jesus engages her with a respect and with the truth. Jesus walks right into the middle of this tension with the neighbors between the Samaritans and the Jewish people. Jesus is not afraid to help her feel known, to help her feel seen. And he helped her to know who he was. So, as we think about this as being good neighbors and how we can follow Jesus' lead on this, I've got some recommendations for us. Each week, this part of my message that I've been calling, what do we need to do to be the kind of neighbors we'd like to have, right? So, looking at this story and what we can draw from it, being the good neighbor you'd want to be. Here we go. Number one, be self-aware, all right? Don't rush to avoid people. Be mindful of the moments when God puts your neighbor in your path. Be aware. Second, be genuinely kind. I have no doubt in my mind that Jesus asking her for the gift of a drink, by breaking through that rule that he wasn't supposed to even act like he saw her. That is pure kindness. We need to have a respect for others, for our neighbors. I don't know where this saying began, but I've clung to it, and I try to remember this as much as I can. None of us will ever meet someone Jesus didn't die for. I think the American church might need to pull that out and have that printed somewhere. None of us will ever meet someone Jesus didn't die for. Kindness opens the doors for conversation. Next, let's go on. Be courageous. Be courageous enough to engage. Ask your neighbor about their stories. Be willing to share some of your stories, right? Don't skip the small talk. Everybody, I know I don't love small talk. Sometimes it is exhausting. But I'll tell you, it is a place where conversations begin. It is like a soil where there might be actual real connection, the potential for it. And finally, let Jesus flow naturally out of your life. Don't force it. I'm telling you, it's not pretty when it's forced. Don't force it. Just let your gratitude and joy in Jesus show up in how you live. A gratitude. I was thinking about that this morning. A new day, a new beginning. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have so much to be thankful for. Let your gratitude for what God has done in your life, let your gratitude for how God continues to show up in your life, let your gratitude for what Jesus has done be a way that helps you be filled with a joy. So that in your everyday life, when you come in contact with someone, when you come in contact with that neighbor of yours, and maybe that neighbor of yours has been standing there beside your yard watching you mow every single week. Or maybe they're just known for that kind of neighbor. Be ready for the moment when God might just open the door. Listen to what happens at the end. I think this is an important part of the story. The woman left her water, right? Like this whole thing unfolds and she's amazed by what Jesus has said. She left her water jar beside the well and she ran back to that village, telling everyone, hey, you want to read this with me? What does she tell them? Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. And listen to what happens next, all right? So the people out of that village, they come streaming out to see Jesus. Where does it begin? It begins by Jesus engaging her with a respect and a truth. Jesus shows us how this is done. Jesus is calling us to do this because this is it. Through us, Jesus heals the world one neighbor at a time. You want to say it with me? Come on. Through us, Jesus heals the world one neighbor at a time. Would you stand? A good neighbor engages with respect and truth. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I want us to move into a time of reflection. Jesus, I bring this to you and I'm leaving it right here for whoever in this room needs to hear it. Maybe there's someone here who has felt invisible and unseen. Maybe they're carrying around a shame and guilt, brought on by a mixture of choices they have made and choices other people have made. There's not a person in this room who doesn't maybe have some scars or some wounds. There's not a person in this room that is not in need of you, a Savior. So God, I just bring to you this moment. There's someone here who doesn't know you, that they would give their life to you. Simple prayer that I lead us in every week. If you want to say it with me, you can whisper it out like this. It goes, Jesus, I give you my life. I confess my selfish sins, and I ask for forgiveness. And Jesus, I trust that you do forgive me, and I receive and I accept your love now. In your name I pray. Amen.